Hello, and welcome to the Why House Church podcast. My name is Luke Franson, here with my brother, Colin Foster. Colin, what are we doing tonight?
Oh, we are talking about what is house church?
What is house church? So we're going to answer the question, what is house church, on the Why House Church podcast.
Exactly. Word for word.
Oh, I just think that's funny.
Don't get too confused. It is what is house church? That's the question we're answering.
On the Why House Church podcast.
Yes.
I'm probably going to say that a few times. No, so a lot of times people sort of hear that we're doing the Why House Church thing, or the Why House Church thing on socials.
Yeah.
And then they say like, oh, house church, that's cool. And then they go check out our content. And we just came out of the gate swinging with like the institutionalized church. And then
Some pretty big statements.
Yeah, some pretty big statements, stuff like that. And they're thinking like, okay, but like, what do you guys actually do?
Yeah. What does it look like?
What does it look like? And hopefully we're just going to answer that in what is probably going to be our shortest episode maybe ever.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so what do we do? As a house church, it's actually, you'll talk to a lot of institutionalized churches and they'll say the sort of same central things. Is like, we want to be a group of disciples that makes disciples. We want to reconcile unholy people back to a holy God through the blood of
Absolutely.
a perfect Savior.
Yeah.
We want to remain unstained from the world, and we want to care for the orphan and the widow. We want to make a positive impact in our communities and in our lives.
Amen to all of that.
Right. Amen
Yes.
to all of that. And so, like, what do? Anything we can do to accomplish those goals are what we're doing.
As best as we can possible.
And so with that, we do, as a house church, we de-emphasize the Sunday service. We definitely de-emphasize the Sunday service, and we'll talk about why.
In a later podcast, yeah.
Yeah, I want to do that in a later podcast. And we sort of try to emphasize our more intimate discipleship and experience of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And our church does that in a number of ways. My contributions as an overseer are colored, informed, perhaps dictated by my experience in higher education.
Ah, yeah.
It's just to like talk about some of the things that I've done as a house church leader to try and get people stronger in the faith, more well-versed in theology. We wanted to understand Revelation.
We did.
That's a very thick book. There's a lot of content there. We probably need some way to sort of feedback our understanding of the content. And so we got a commentary from Craig Keener.
We did.
Excellent commentary.
It was.
And then I wrote 10 weeks of quizzes.
He's not kidding.
Graded them after I wrote rubrics for the quizzes.
Yep.
And then posted the scores.
And it was so helpful. Like, so helpful. We learned a lot. We were able to see like our own thought processes, but all other people's thought processes, how they got there, but also then like test like, okay, was my thinking stupid or was it actually beneficial and helpful and scriptural to get like to answer this question? You know what I mean?
Was I on the right track? Were there colors that I missed? Yeah. And so there were a few things that I was thinking about. I'm definitely one of those that will say like, not everybody's going to get a perfect score, and that's okay.
Yes.
Nobody got a perfect score, but none of the points mattered anyway. So
It was all for fun.
yeah, like I didn't assign letter grades or anything out. I guess I could have, but I would have had to curve the class.
Yeah.
Based on the top performers, which conveniently
Was.
the other two overseers.
Yep.
Which was actually a huge sign to me
Mm-hmm.
that we were on the right track. Because they were the most well-studied out of the church, and they did the best.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, the construct validity of my exams was good.
Yeah.
In general, they're all good.
Yeah.
And then I gave a half an hour talk on construct validity on one of my other lectures that I gave the church. I always say, when I put these together in my head too, I always say lectures to myself.
Yeah.
Not sermons, not like I used to use language in teachings. I used to use that language in teachings.
Yeah.
But then I just sat through so many years of lectures the way that I structure them is lectures.
Oh, the lectures. Yeah.
The lectures. I made 110-point PowerPoint deck, and like we went through the whole thing in probably an hour 20 minutes.
Definitely lecture. Yeah.
That was definitely a lecture. We had notes. There was an attendance quiz at the end.
I took that. It was good.
I haven't graded any. It was kind of a joke, so I didn't read any of the answers.
I filled it out as kind of a joke too, so it's okay. Yeah.
That's okay. Do you want attendance points for that?
No.
Nobody's tracking that. So like, my head as an overseer is definitely more towards that scholarly bent.
Yeah.
But that's just also who I am as a person. It's kind of my experience and the color that I bring to the church.
Yeah.
Some of the other two overseers have their sort of bents and preferences and leanings. I definitely, it's funny to me because they'll always lean towards corporate worship sooner than I will. I just, like, I love worshiping the Lord.
Yeah.
But a lot of my experience in the institutional church, I was a worship guy.
Yeah.
I was always on or around a stage doing
setting
the worship
it up,
thing.
getting it ready.
And so I don't know if just how much experience I had there, and then finding the richness of community and theology. Like, one of my favorite things to do now is to do that exercise where we take that big question and we spin the wheel and give it to somebody in the church.
And we have somebody answer that question and practice as if they're talking to somebody for the first time, explaining what the question is.
Well, and we just see where the conversation leads us. And I feel like we get so theologically rich in our conversation. We get to these major sort of flexion points in the conversation where we talk about big theological truths.
Yeah.
Like things that should inform our behaviors to a very high degree that maybe don't because we don't think about them.
Yeah.
And sort of taking that theological temperature of the church too, I like, because it also pushes me to sort of find the points in my own faith that maybe I'm not so sure on.
Yeah.
And then that gives me the opportunity to be a human in front of my church and say, look, I actually don't have all the answers to everything.
Yeah.
I'm trying my best to lead you, but I'm just a guy.
I'm not perfect. I'm a human. I have these same worries and concerns and thoughts. Yeah. Yeah.
That's if you were to just, take away the other two overseers and ask you, like, Luke, what do you want to do today? I'm probably almost always going to say that.
That one. Yeah.
Like, we're going to talk theology today.
Yeah. So with the what is house church, I mean, you've already said a few examples, but like for us, we do, on a day-to-day basis, it looks different. Like it is dependent on what the people need and where we're at the day of. Yeah,
we de-emphasize the Sunday service, the liturgy, and we emphasize discipleship, and whatever we need to do to disciple the people is what we do.
That's what we're doing that day.
Yeah.
Whether it's worship, whether it's answering questions about theology and practicing that with one another, whether it's praying together. We did that today.
That's true. We did spend time in prayer. Small groups?
Small groups.
Yeah, spend time praying with our small groups. We do small groups.
That's another good example.
That's another thing.
What we do.
Because, we've gone through seasons with different small groups.
Yes.
We had a time when there was, like, each person was sort of paired with an overseer.
Yeah, I remember that.
In their small group. And so we had 3 small groups for 3 overseers, and we went through that sort of intentional discipleship where we read the entire New Testament.
Yeah.
At different paces. I remember that because I threw that idea out. And then my wife, who's a more structured overseer, she was like, I don't like that, but I think we should do it.
Yeah. Like, she hated the fact that she liked the idea, but she was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
So, like, that's probably a good idea. I'm just uncomfortable. Yeah, we need to do another 10-week class again.
I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, we should go back to the structure for her. No, it's for me. It's for me. So, like we've had that where we go into small groups, we read through the New Testament. Right now we have 4 small groups.
We do. 4. Yeah.
4. And one of them doesn't have an overseer.
2 of them don't.
2 of them don't have an overseer.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. My bad. Quick math. And so we're sort of in a lot of transition points for a lot of people in the church right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we are trying to sort of find our feet in the next season and figure out what is important to me and how do I structure my life in a meaningful way around my values.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty intimate sort of conversation to have with your 15 other church body members.
Yep.
So, yeah, we split into smaller groups
Mm-hmm.
to really have those conversations, kind of hash those out with some of our closer joints.
Yeah.
And that's just what our church needs right now. I don't think these small groups are forever. I think we are going to do another course soon.
Yeah.
Which I'm super pumped about, actually. And, and I could just have my own confirmation bias. If we don't do another course soon, I'll be okay.
I'll be okay too, but I am kind of looking forward to another course.
And, we'll just see where the church needs in the next season.
Yeah.
And
we're open to whatever the church needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's also like, what does the church need? But like, what does the church need to do in order to glorify God, to make disciples, to care for the orphan and the widow? Like, those are the conversations. That's what we're answering. And I think it's really important that we sort of de-emphasize as well. It's not just about growing the church.
Yeah.
And growing the church might not even be super high on the list. Like, I want to go make disciples, but really, I just want to be a good representation of Christ and of the Lord to the world.
Yeah.
And if I can do that,
that is important.
Yeah, like, that's what I want. It doesn't matter how big my church is. It doesn't matter how many people I get to follow me. That's what I want.
Yeah. Help others grow in maturity and learn about the Lord and have that relationship with the Lord where they can be a witness to the rest of the world as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, too, like, that's why flexibility is so important to us.
Yeah, because the needs are going to change depending on who's in the church and at what stage in our life we're at.
That's why things change so fast, yeah.
Yeah. And, we kind of rail against the institutionalized church in the podcast, Why House Church, which I think is what you get.
Fair
like,
enough,
you have to talk about
Yep.
it. We have to talk about it. And I want to talk about why the Sunday morning service might not be such a good idea, but I want to talk about that in a different podcast.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about right now the fact that, for a lot of smaller churches, they operate sort of in that same emphasis. Like,
As house churches.
yeah, let's say you have a community of somewhere between 25 and 50 people, or let's go lower, 20 and 50 people.
Yeah.
Who get together every week.
Pitching after they meet together.
They sing songs together, and like, let's say, they do have a pastor who stands up and gives a sermon every week.
Yeah.
That's fine. They still have a respected board of elders that kind of looks over the church and the money and the building and the people.
Yep.
And then they all know each other.
Yep.
And if somebody doesn't show up, they know.
They'll ask.
They'll ask. They'll go find and say, hey, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they do their best to remain unstained from the world and care for the orphan and the widow and to grow in their own theology and discipleship and to sort of make disciples who make disciples.
Yeah. May have a prayer group on Monday night and a Bible study on Wednesday night. And
those smaller church communities, that is not the sort of reflexive pushback of the house church movement.
No, not at all.
I think there are more commonalities between those churches than there are differences.
I agree.
With what we're doing. I mean, like, sure, you know what? I might push back against having one man as a priest class and the liturgy of the Sunday morning. Like I'll push back against that, but I have a really hard time saying that that's a problem. I think
because, like you said before, they're still caring for the orphan and the widow. They're still being unstained from the world. They're still going out and making disciples who make disciples. You know what I mean? Like all those things.
They're part of a body where every joint supplies.
And they care for one another, look out for one another.
And, if you're talking about the church of Christ, Christ is the head, and we're all members, and everybody has their certain part, and they all supply, and there might be newer members, older members.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard for me to look at that and say, like, you're wrong and I'm right and you need to do my thing. Like, my problem isn't really with the building. The problem isn't even with, like, that culture.
No.
It's more of that hyper-institutionalized consumer megachurch culture.
Yeah.
Like, if you can just stop showing up one day and nobody's going to reach out and say, like, where you been?
It's a little worrisome. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I was thinking about this the other day. Like, there's some gyms, powerlifting gyms mostly.
Yeah.
You got like the big two downtown, Indy City Barbell, Circle City Strength. You've got, like those more boutique gyms. I don't go to either of those. Just for what it's worth. I don't know. Home gym. I don't know. That's my vibe.
It's nice. Yeah.
Right?
Keep going. Sorry.
Anyway, but like if somebody stops going there, their friends are probably gonna say something.
Yeah.
Like, hey man, you haven't been to the gym. Like, what's
You
going on?
alright?
Are you injured?
Yeah.
Like, are you safe?
What's going
are you
on?
just quitting? But if like somebody stops going to some of these major churches around, who's checking on them?
Yeah.
And if they're a part of a small group, a more intimate faith community, odds are they're going to get checked on.
Which is great.
I love that. But if they're not, then they probably won't.
Yeah.
And, like, great, they're on an email list, but I'm on church email lists. Like, a bunch of the sort of city churches, I'm just on their email list. Like, whether it's from signing up for a worship night here and there, like whether it's from playing on a Sunday morning, whether it's just from, I don't know, clicking subscribe, and like, if you can get exactly what you're getting just from engaging online, like a live stream, something like that, that's my reflexive pushback.
Yeah.
It's like, what is house church is a sort of reflexive pushback against that.
Yeah. We want that engagement, that participation in that community, that
I think we see a large amount of precedent for in the Bible.
Yeah. And encourages that faith.
Yeah, and so, like the other question is like, okay, so why am I seeing this now? Like, why are you doing this now?
Great question.
Yeah, great. House church has always kind of been on the periphery. Like, these small, intimate faith communities have always worked well for creating disciples.
Yes.
We saw this explode in the last 20 to 30 years is actually on college campuses.
Yeah.
Where people really do a lot of their life rhythms in the same spaces, and they disciple each other very intimately. It's, more intimate, personal, intense discipleship way. And like, that's what you saw in the last 20 or 30 years in particular.
Mm-hmm.
But these small faith communities have always been a part of the call of Christianity. I think more than anything else right now, our access to information and to opinions of leading scholars and to sermons of leading pastors, like leaders in the faith, our ability to access their thoughts and books is at an all-time high.
Completely different than it was 100, 200 years ago.
It's completely different than it was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's entirely different than it was 20 years ago.
That's a very good
point. I mean,
point.
at the very early stages of the internet, people weren't putting these things out. Like even YouTube in 2010, it was just like video games and some how-to videos, but even then it was kind of hard to find a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
The age of information, I think, is sort of hitting this apex that allows us to sort of dive into the forefront of wherever we're trying to live in that space.
Yeah.
The fact that I, as a layperson, can access the works and the published articles of Dr. Michael Heiser, and can sort of track down the textual ancestries of like the Vulgate and like the Septuagint, and what the significance is between the Vulgate and the Septuagint, and the fact that the Septuagint was the Bible for the early church.
Yeah.
That fact alone, that I didn't go to a seminary, I didn't go to a Bible college, like,
but you can read it and understand the implications of what they're trying to get their point across with.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, that's spectacular. And it puts a Christian in a place where it's like, okay, now we're faced with all these different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
The responsibility is obviously higher because we have to discern which one might be dangerous or which one might be sort of more benign. Where do we land? How much do we really have to answer these questions? And that's where it's important to have a mature and better educated member of your church around you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or at least somebody who's willing to say, I don't know, but I want to go find out.
Yeah.
Somebody who's willing to put in that work to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that allows us to be in this unique space where suddenly house church is not only more beneficial towards that more intimate discipleship community, but also where we can have these intense theological discussions with outside resources, and we can sort of question a lot of these beliefs and maybe a lot of the things that you might hear preached on a Sunday morning. Like, we can just question it, and we can actually hold it up against differing opinions.
Yeah.
And say, like, okay, does this hold water? Like, is this a good, strong argument?
Yeah.
And not only that, but it also allows us to get deeper and more thorough in our own biblical study, and I think allows us to really take a step further. I mean, the simple fact that we did a 10-week Revelation course with a commentary that was graded 4 points,
Wild.
That's something that's really hard to accomplish in a lot of other settings.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah. Unless you're in grad school or yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about, I really believe that if I could structure that course to be like a semester-long introduction to Revelation, or like a Revelation course, maybe not even introduction.
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty intense. I use some outside articles
Very
and resources
helpful.
too,
Yeah.
in the ways that we sort of had to approach it. So like, we come to a point too where if they sort of have to pull the sermon back for the lowest common denominator,
That's a good point.
then we can actually push beyond that in the house church
In ways that we never thought before. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the flexibility and the freedom to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the information to do that well.
And to help one another get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also have the connectivity with other house churches where we can cross-pollinate. We can go and challenge them. We can go up to,
see our own biases and
Mm-hmm. And we can have these more intense conversations with people who might believe differently than us, but agree on, the sort of core, central, foundational
truths
doctrines
about Christ and God. And
Yeah, and if somebody wants me to go proctor the 10-week Revelation course, I'd probably do it.
Yeah.
I'd probably do that for another church. I am not going to pull any punches in my grading, though, so be careful what you ask for.
You get what you get. Yeah.
And so what is house church? I like to think it's an emphasis on discipleship, allowing for feedback to change course of action.
Yeah. As needed for the people. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like you say, like, okay, are we creating disciples? How do we know that? What do we need to do differently in order to accomplish it to a greater degree?
That's a good point.
And if something's working, let's just double down on it.
Yeah. Excellent.
And so pulling away from the liturgy, and again, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
in a different episode, and sort of emphasizing the things that we're finding working for the people in that time. That's what house church is. And it looks different depending on what season you catch us in.
That's a good point.
It looks different depending on what church you're even talking to. Like, we just do things differently. I don't know of any other church that's done like a 10-week graded course.
None that I know of. Yeah, I know people have studied books together, but none.
Yeah, I mean, they've done Bible study.
Yeah, but not as intensive, like question specific.
They didn't do grades.
Yeah,
even if they did like the more structured grades or the more structured studies,
asking questions, but
they didn't grade it.
I think that your question though of like, what is house church? It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. Why the emphasis is we want to commit ourselves to the Lord. We want to put that first, and we will do that with what we think the people need at the time being.
Yeah.
And what's working with those people. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to commit ourselves to that first and foremost.
Yeah.
So.
Any other closing thoughts?
No, that's it.
All right.
Nice.
If you've got questions, comments, go ahead and subscribe down below. If you've got ideas for more content, we mentioned a few here in this podcast, but we'll always take that as well. You can either reach out to the Lighthouse Church email, comment on our videos, interact with us on socials.
And if you do follow, you'll see more coming out soon. You'll get notifications for it. So
that's right. And we're only going to make content when we feel like there's content to be made.
Yes. Good point.
So make sure you subscribe so that way you know.
Exactly.
All right.
Thank you.
Signing off. Take care.